The first thing I heard was laughter. Not relief. Not gratitude. Laughter. It echoed across the rain-soaked intersection as I lay on my knees beside the overturned flower cart, my palms scraped raw against broken asphalt. White lilies, roses, and sunflowers floated through muddy water like tiny boats carrying someone else's dreams away. Look at him. A taxi driver trying to play hero. He'll probably ask for money next. A police officer pushed the crowd back while an ambulance crew worked frantically beside me. Their attention wasn't on me. It was on the young woman lying unconscious beneath a silver emergency blanket. Her eyes had remained closed from the moment I pulled her out of the collapsing storefront. Blind, terrified, and still apologizing while the ceiling came down. I'm sorry, she had whispered, even as dust filled her lungs. My flowers. Those were the last words she managed before losing consciousness. Someone shoved my shoulder. You blocked traffic for 20 minutes. A businessman in an expensive suit snapped. Do you know how much money people lost because of your little performance? I looked up slowly. Rain dripped from the torn brim of my faded cap. My jacket had been stitched together so many times that none of the original fabric remained visible. People saw those things before they saw my face. They always did. I'm sorry, I answered quietly. The businessman clicked his tongue. Of course you are. He walked away. The crowd followed him. No one asked whether I had survived. No one asked my name. The paramedics loaded the blind florist into the ambulance. One of them stopped beside me. You saved her. I nodded. Will she live? We don't know yet. That answer stayed with me long after the ambulance disappeared into the rain. My taxi smelled faintly of old coffee and engine oil. The windshield carried a crack that split the city lights into crooked rivers every night. Customers complained. The company deducted repair costs from my earnings whenever they could. Still, it was mine. Or at least, it was the only place that still felt like it belonged to me. I drove until dawn. No passengers. The news spread faster than I expected. Videos from the accident appeared online. Not the rescue. Only the moment where I stumbled in torn clothes after carrying the woman outside. The captions mocked me. Homeless taxi driver pretends to be hero. Another publicity stunt. Probably wants donations. Millions watched. Almost nobody questioned what actually happened. I turned off my phone. Silence was easier. The garage owner tossed my keys across the office. You've become famous. I don't need fame. No, he agreed. You need customers. He hesitated before continuing. Corporate clients are canceling bookings. I already knew why. People prefer drivers who looked successful. Nobody wanted to arrive at a luxury hotel in a taxi driven by someone whose sleeves had been sewn together by hand. They think I'm bad for business. He avoided my eyes. I didn't say that. You didn't have to. He sighed. Take a few days. I can't. You have to. My rent was already overdue. Fuel prices had climbed again. Missing work wasn't a vacation. It was another step toward sleeping inside the car. That afternoon, I bought fresh bread instead of lunch. Not for myself. For the stray dog that waited outside the repair shop every day. He wagged his tail before I even opened the paper bag. You're smarter than most people, I muttered. He accepted the bread without judgment. No questions. No laughter. No assumptions. Sometimes kindness came easiest to creatures who expected nothing. The hospital corridor smelled of disinfectant and damp umbrellas. I wasn't sure why I had come. Maybe because I wanted to know whether she survived. Maybe because I couldn't stop hearing her apologizing while the building collapsed. The receptionist frowned. Family. No. Friend. No. She studied my clothes. You can't visit. I understand. As I turned away, an elderly nurse called after me. Were you the taxi driver? I nodded. The young woman woke up. Something inside my chest loosened. Can I? 5 minutes. She sat upright beside the window. Bandages covered one side of her forehead. Her white cane rested against the bed. She turned her face toward the sound of my footsteps. Someone's there. My name is Ethan. Not entirely true. Most people call me Ethan because they couldn't pronounce my real name years ago, and eventually I stopped correcting them. You saved me. I happened to be nearby. She smiled faintly. No. Her fingers tightened around the blanket. You stayed. Silence settled between us. I lost my flowers. I'm sorry. They were for my customers. She laughed softly. I remember every flower by scent. I looked toward the empty vase on the bedside table. I'll bring you new ones. You don't have to. I know. For reasons I couldn't explain. I wanted it anyway. Outside the room, two nurses whispered. That's him. The poor driver. Looks even worse in person. Neither realized I could hear them. I kept walking. There was nothing left to defend. The flower market opened before sunrise. Vendors recognized me from the viral videos. Some refused to serve me. Others double the price. An elderly florist finally waved me over. For the blind girl? Yes. He selected the freshest lilies himself. No charge. I can't accept that. You already paid. How? With what you did. I stood there for several seconds before accepting the bouquet. It was the first time in days someone had looked at me without suspicion. I almost forgot what that felt like. When I returned to the hospital, her bed was empty. A nurse approached. She discharged herself. So soon, she insisted. Where did she go? The nurse hesitated. Back to work. Already, she said flowers don't sell themselves. I looked down at the bouquet in my hands. The petals were still covered with morning dew. I had arrived too late. Again, that evening I finally found her. Her tiny flower stall stood beneath an aging pedestrian bridge. Business was slow. Most customers passed without stopping. She recognized my footsteps. You came. I brought these. She reached toward the bouquet carefully, brushing the petals with gentle fingertips. They're lilies. You knew. They smell like quiet mornings. She smiled. My grandmother used to say, every flower carries a memory. I watched people hurry past. None of them noticed us. The city had room for luxury towers, celebrity restaurants, and million-dollar advertisements. Yet somehow, the smallest flower stall and the oldest taxi had found each other. Neither belonged. Perhaps that was why neither looked away. I never thanked you properly, she said. You don't owe me anything. I owe you my life. I shook my head. Just keep living. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then she asked the question no one else had. Have you eaten today? I couldn't answer immediately, because the truth embarrassed me more than every insult I'd heard. She understood before I spoke. I thought so. She reached beneath the counter and placed a warm steamed bun into my hands. It isn't much. I stared at it. No customer had offered me food in years. No stranger had noticed my hunger. Yet the woman everyone assumed needed saving had quietly seen through every wall I had built. As traffic roared above us, I realized something I had spent years refusing to admit. The cruelest poverty wasn't having torn clothes. It was living so long without being truly seen. Near the edge of the sidewalk, a black luxury sedan slowed almost imperceptibly. Its tinted rear window lowered by less than an inch. Someone inside watched the flower stall in complete silence before the car disappeared into the evening traffic. I never noticed. Neither did she. But somewhere inside that passing vehicle, a question had already begun to change both of our lives. The people who expect endless sacrifice are often the ones who value it least. That night, as I drove my battered taxi through rain-dark streets, I made one quiet decision. I would stop trying to convince the world I was worth respecting. If the truth ever mattered, it would find its own voice. If it never did, I would still choose the kind of man I wanted to be. The next morning, I didn't drive toward the financial district. For years, I had started every day there because wealthy passengers tipped better. They also complained more, treated me like part of the upholstery, and expected me to smile while they reminded me that people like me were replaceable. That morning, I turned the wheel in the opposite direction. The riverfront, the older neighborhoods, the places where people still thanked a taxi driver before closing the door. It didn't earn me more money. It earned me quieter days. As I parked near the flower market, I noticed May already arranging fresh bouquets. Her movements were slow but precise, each flower finding its place through memory rather than sight. You changed your route, she said without looking up. You recognized the engine. She smiled. I recognized your silence. I laughed for the first time in weeks. You don't talk much when you're worried. I didn't know anyone noticed. I do. Her answer was simple. No pity. No admiration. Just fact. Business remained poor. Several customers glanced at my taxi before whispering to one another. One young man pointed his phone toward me. Aren't you that fake hero from the internet? His girlfriend frowned. I heard the rescue was staged. May stopped arranging flowers. Did you see it happen? No. Then why repeat it? The couple exchanged embarrassed looks before walking away. I didn't stop them. Olmi would have explained everything. Collected witness statements. shown news reports, proved every accusation wrong. Now, I simply carried another bucket of water to keep the flowers alive. Truth didn't become stronger because I argued louder. Near noon, a black luxury sedan parked across the street. The same model I had glimpsed days earlier. A middle-aged man stepped out wearing an immaculate charcoal suit. He didn't approach immediately. Instead, he watched me greet customers, watch her count coins carefully by touch, watched her smile, even when people left without buying anything. Finally, he crossed the street. "I'd like 12 white lilies." May nodded. "Certainly." As she wrapped the bouquet, the man studied her face with unsettling intensity. "Have we met before?" he asked. "I don't think so. You remind me of someone." She paused only briefly before handing him the flowers. "I hope they're a pleasant memory." For the first time, the man's composed expression cracked. "It is." He paid without asking the price. When he left, I noticed a business card had slipped onto the counter. Not accidentally, deliberately. The name read, Victor Shun, Executive Secretary, Shun International Holdings, one of the city's largest business empires. I tucked the card beneath the cash box before the wind could carry it away. Neither of us understood why such a man had visited a forgotten flower stall. That evening, my phone rang. The taxi company. "Ethan, where are you?" "Working." A corporate client specifically requested another driver. "Understand." "No." My manager hesitated. "They requested you." I frowned. "Why?" They didn't say. The pickup address belonged to Shun International Headquarters. 48 floors of glass and steel. A building people photographed more often than they entered. Security escorted me directly to the executive entrance. Waiting outside stood Victor Shun. He entered the back seat without a word. "Good evening." "Drive." "Destination?" "The East Memorial Cemetery." I checked the mirror. His expression remained unreadable. During the drive, he asked quietly, "Do you know why I requested you?" "No." I watched the rescue. I kept my eyes on the road. There were dozens of cameras. "No." He shook his head. I watched from across the street. The memory returned instantly. The luxury sedan. The partially lowered window. "It wasn't staged," he continued. "I know. So do I." Silence filled the taxi. Rain tapped softly against the roof. "You carried her back inside." I thought someone else was trapped. There wasn't. I didn't know that. "You went anyway." I shrugged. It seemed necessary. Victor looked out the window. Men rarely risk their lives without expecting something in return. I wasn't thinking. "Perhaps." His voice softened. "Perhaps that's exactly why you did." At the cemetery, he placed the lilies before an elegant marble headstone. The inscription read, Shunjian, beloved son, missing, never forgotten. Not deceased. Missing. I stared at the words. Victor noticed. "The stone exists because hope needed somewhere to grieve." "You still believe he's alive?" I never stopped. He turned toward me. "The young florist." I waited. "Where did you meet her?" "The accident." "Nothing before that." "No." He nodded slowly, though disappointment lingered in his eyes. Before leaving, he handed me an envelope. "My fare." "It isn't necessary." "It is." After he disappeared through the cemetery gate, I opened it. Inside wasn't cash. It was a handwritten note. "Please keep protecting her. She may be in greater danger than she realizes." No signature. No explanation. Only those 12 words. That night, I couldn't sleep. The note rested on the kitchen table beside an unpaid electricity bill. Protect her. From whom? And why would one of the city's most powerful families be interested in a blind florist selling flowers beneath an aging bridge? None of it made sense. Until the following morning. I arrived at the flower stall to find it destroyed. Broken pots littered the pavement. Soil covered the sidewalk. Fresh roses had been crushed beneath expensive leather shoes. 3 men in tailored suits stood waiting. The tallest smiled without warmth. "You must be the taxi driver." I stepped between him and May. "What do you want?" He ignored me. Instead, he looked directly at May. "You've been very difficult to find." May gripped her white cane tightly. "I think you've mistaken me for someone else." The man's smile widened. "No." He reached into his jacket and produced an old photograph. The edges were faded. A young man stood beside a laughing woman. Between them was May, years younger, and visibly pregnant. The air seemed to stop moving. My heartbeat thundered in my ears. The man folded the photograph carefully. Our chairman would like to know what happened to the child. The world around us fell silent. The photograph trembled in May's hands. I've never seen this before, she whispered. The suited man watched her expression carefully, as though weighing every breath she took. You don't remember? She lowered her head. I lost part of my memory after the accident 3 years ago. I turned sharply toward her. You never told me. She gave me an apologetic smile. You never asked. She wasn't hiding it. She simply lived with it. That realization struck me harder than the revelation itself. The man folded the photograph and returned it to his pocket. Our chairman would like to speak with you. I'm not going anywhere. Her answer was calm, firm. I won't force you, he replied. But someone has spent years making sure you never learn the truth. He handed me another envelope. If she changes her mind, bring her here. Printed across the front was a single address. Shin Estate. Then the 3 men walked away without another word. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. Broken flower pots surrounded the stall. Rain began falling again. I quietly picked up the shattered ceramic pieces. May knelt beside me. I'm sorry. You didn't break them. But trouble keeps following me. I stopped gathering the pieces. No. She turned toward my voice. People choose trouble. They chose to destroy your flowers. They chose to frighten you. That belongs to them. She remained silent. For the first time since we'd met, I saw fear on her face. Not fear for herself. Fear of remembering. That evening I repaired the flower shells with leftover wood from the taxi garage. Old Mr. Huang, the elderly florist who had once given me free lilies, arrived carrying fresh plants. I heard what happened. You didn't have to come. He shrugged. Flowers grow again. He looked toward May. So do people. Without another word, he began planting new seedlings beside the damaged stall. Soon another neighboring vendor joined him. Then another. Nobody made speeches. Nobody asked for recognition. They simply worked. By sunset, the little flower stand looked alive again. May quietly wiped tears from her cheeks. I don't know how to repay everyone. Mr. Huang smiled. You already have. Ow. You reminded us kindness still exists. Days passed. I noticed unfamiliar vehicles parked near the bridge almost every afternoon. Different drivers. Different license plates. Always watching. Never approaching. Victor Shen called only once. Has anyone threatened her? No. Good. Can you tell me what's happening? A long pause. I can tell you only one thing. I'm listening. My family has made terrible mistakes. The line went silent. Meanwhile, life continued. Or at least it tried to. I drove passengers. May sold flowers. Some mornings were busy. Others weren't. The online mockery gradually faded as people found someone new to ridicule. For the first time in years, I stopped checking comments. People who had never met me no longer deserved space inside my head. That alone felt like freedom. One rainy afternoon, a young journalist arrived at the flower stall. My name is Claire. She showed us her press identification. I've been investigating the warehouse accident. May frowned. Why? Because official reports don't match witness statements. She opened a folder. Several photographs spilled across the counter. One showed me carrying May through smoke. Another showed construction workers arguing moments before the collapse. A third revealed something entirely different. The emergency exit, locked from the outside. I stared at the image. That can't be legal. It isn't. Claire nodded. Someone ordered the doors chained during renovations. My stomach tightened. So the collapse wasn't just an accident. We're still investigating. She hesitated. But every document connected to the building disappears. Who owns it? She looked directly at me. A subsidiary of Shun International. That night, I drove aimlessly through the city. Questions circled endlessly. If Shun International owned the building, why had Victor helped us? Why warn me? Why investigate his own company? Nothing fit together. My phone rang. Unknown number. Ethan. It was Victor. Listen carefully. His voice was unusually tense. The board discovered I'm investigating old company records. What records? The warehouse. I tightened my grip on the steering wheel. They're destroying evidence. Ooh, I can't explain over the phone. His breathing quickened. If anything happens to me. The call ended abruptly. The next morning, every financial news channel carried the same headline. Senior Executive Victor Shun resigns effective immediately. No interviews. No explanation. Just resignation. I knew better. Men like Victor didn't resign overnight. They were removed. Silenced. Later that afternoon, I found a small package inside my taxi. No sende. Inside lay a worn leather notebook. Its first page contained only one sentence. If you're reading this, they already know I trusted you. Every remaining page documented internal company payments, falsified safety inspections, and secret transfers stretching back years. Near the final page, one name appeared repeatedly. Adrian Shun, chairman's younger brother, current acting CEO. Beside his name was a handwritten note. He never wanted my nephew to come home. My heartbeat echoed through the empty taxi. This was no inheritance dispute. Someone inside the Shin family had spent years protecting a lie. And if Victor's notebook was accurate, May wasn't being watched because she was a witness. She was being watched because someone feared what she might remember, or whom she might find. I closed the notebook slowly. For weeks I had resisted becoming involved. I had told myself that silence was wisdom, that walking away from other people's battles was the only way to survive. But there was a difference between refusing to seek revenge and abandoning innocent people to those who feared the truth. Sometimes the hardest thing to do is nothing. This was no longer one of those times. I started the engine. There was only one place left to go, the Shun estate, and I had the feeling someone inside was already waiting for me. The iron gates of the Shun estate opened before I touched the intercom. Someone had been expecting me. My taxi rolled slowly along a driveway lined with ancient pine trees. The mansion at the end looked less like a home than a monument. Stone walls, towering columns, and windows that reflected the gray afternoon sky. A butler was already waiting. "Mr. Ethan?" I nodded. "Chairman Shun will see you." His expression carried no curiosity, only exhaustion, as though the house itself had forgotten what peace felt like. The study smelled of old books and tea leaves. An elderly man stood beside a large window overlooking the gardens. His back remained turned toward me. I wondered how long it would take. His voice was calm, heavy. When he finally turned, I immediately recognized the resemblance. The sharp jawline, the quiet eyes. He looked like an older version of a young man carved into the cemetery memorial. "You're Chairman Shun." "I am." He gestured toward a chair. "Victor trusted you." "I don't know why." The chairman managed a faint smile. "Sometimes character is easier to recognize than blood." Neither of us sat. Instead, he studied me carefully. "You carried a stranger into a collapsing building." I didn't think. "Exactly." He sighed. "My family has spent years thinking, and almost no time doing what was right." I placed Victor's notebook on the desk. His eyes lingered on it for several long seconds. "So he succeeded. You knew. I hope." He rested one hand on the leather cover. "My younger brother controls half the board." "Adrian." "Yes." The chairman's voice hardened. "The day my son disappeared, Adrian insisted the police stop searching after 48 hours. Why? He claimed Jian had run away. And you believed him?" "I wanted to." The old man closed his eyes. "Hope can make intelligent people foolish." Before I could answer, the study doors burst open. A man in an expensive navy suit strode inside without knocking. Silver streaks crossed his dark hair. His smile was perfect. Too perfect. "Adrian Shun. I heard we had a guest." His gaze settled on me. The taxi driver. Chairman Shun's expression turned cold. "Leave." "I'm afraid I can't." Adrian noticed the notebook immediately. For the first time, his confidence faltered. "Where did you get that?" "It belongs to Victor." Silence. Only for a second. Then Adrian laughed. My nephew always enjoyed dramatic gestures. He looked toward his older brother. "Surely you aren't taking accusations from a driver seriously." The chairman answered quietly. "I've spent years listening to the wrong people." Adrian's smile disappeared. "You've grown sentimental. I've grown tired. Tired enough to destroy this family." Chairman Shin stepped closer. "No, you did that." The room fell silent. Adrian looked at me. "You have no idea what you're involved in." "Then explain." He didn't. Instead, he turned toward the chairman. "If this reaches the board, investors will panic. There are people dead because safety inspections were forged. There were accidents. There were crimes." The distinction echoed through the room. At that moment, the butler entered hurriedly. "Sir." He looked frightened. "The investigative journalists have arrived." Chairman Shin glanced toward me. "I invited them." Adrian stared in disbelief. "You what?" "I've hidden enough." Within minutes, the mansion's conference hall filled with reporters, legal advisors, and board members. Claire, the journalist from the flower market, stood near the front with her camera crew. Victor entered moments later. Alive. Tired. But alive. Relief washed through me. Adrian's face turned pale. You said he resigned. Victor looked directly at him. I never submitted my resignation. He placed a stack of documents on the conference table. You forged it. Whispers spread across the room. One director stood abruptly. Is this true? Victor answered by switching on the projector. Internal emails appeared one after another. Safety inspection reports. Deleted financial transfers. Security footage timestamps. Every file pointed toward the same conclusion. Construction materials had been deliberately downgraded. Emergency exits had been illegally locked. Bribes had concealed everything. The warehouse collapse that nearly killed May had never been an accident. It had been the predictable result of greed. Adrian finally shouted, "These documents prove nothing." Claire stepped forward. "They match every record my investigation uncovered." Another lawyer spoke. "The signatures have already been authenticated." One board member quietly removed his company pin. Another lowered his eyes. No one defended Adrian anymore. Not because they had suddenly become honest. Because the truth had become impossible to outrun. Then the chairman asked the only question that mattered. "My son." Adrian said nothing. "Where is Jian?" Silence. Again. "Answer me." Adrian looked around the room. At the reporters. At the cameras. At the board. His shoulders slowly slumped. "I don't know." The chairman's face remained expressionless. "But I know who does." Every head turned toward him. The man who arranged his disappearance. Gasps filled the hall. Adrian whispered a single name. Han Wei. Victor immediately recognized it. The former security chief. He disappeared years ago. "No," Adrian replied. "I paid him to disappear." Police officers entered before anyone could react. Claire had already alerted authorities before the meeting began. An inspector approached Adrian. "Mr. Adrian Shun, you're under arrest for fraud, obstruction of justice, corporate homicide, and conspiracy." He didn't resist. As handcuffs closed around his wrists, he looked toward me. "You think this changes anything?" I met his eyes. "I didn't come here to change you. I came because someone deserved the truth." For the first time since we'd met. He had no answer. Outside the mansion, dozens of reporters surrounded me. "Are you the whistleblower? Did you expose Shin International? What reward are you expecting?" I shook my head. "I'm going back to work." "You become famous." "I was famous last week. They mocked me. This week they're cheering." "Neither tells you who I am." I walked past every microphone. Some stories belong to headlines. Others belong to the people still living them. When I returned to the flower stall, May was watering a row of newly blooming lilies. She heard my footsteps. "You're late." I had somewhere to be. She smiled gently. "I knew you'd come back." I looked around the rebuilt stall. Children laughed nearby. Customers stopped to buy flowers. For the first time since I'd met her, no unfamiliar cars were watching from across the street. The silence felt different. Lighter. Not because every problem had disappeared. Because fear no longer owned the place. May turned toward me. "Did something end today?" I looked at the evening sunlight settling across the flowers. "No," I answered quietly. "Something finally began." Truth does not create damage. It reveals where damage already exists. The city moved on faster than I expected. For nearly a week, every news channel discussed the Shin scandal. Analysts argued over stock prices. Reporters camped outside the company headquarters. Social media, which had once mocked the ragged taxi driver, now praised me as an unlikely hero. I ignored it all. Praise could become contempt overnight. I had already learned not to build my life on strangers' opinions. The following Monday, I drove my taxi as usual. An elderly passenger climbed into the back seat, carrying a small bag of groceries. "Hospital, please." "Of course." Halfway there, she looked at me through the rearview mirror. "You're him." "I suppose I am." "The young man from the news." I smiled faintly. "I still charge by the meter." She laughed. "So you do." When we reached the hospital, she counted her money carefully. She came up short. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I thought I had enough." I looked at the groceries beside her. "Keep it." "Oh no. Please." She hesitated before stepping out. "My grandson says kindness always comes back." After she disappeared through the hospital doors, I rested my hands on the steering wheel. I wasn't waiting for kindness to come back anymore. Giving had become enough. The flower stall flourished in quiet ways. Not because of television coverage. Because customers returned. Some remembered May's warmth. Others admired the fresh arrangements she created despite never seeing them. Mr. Huang visited almost every morning. His old bicycle squeaked loudly enough that everyone recognized his arrival before they saw him. He pretended to complain. These knees aren't what they used to be. Then he spent 3 hours helping anyway. Community, I realized, rarely announced itself. It simply appeared. Again and again. One afternoon, Chairman Shun arrived without security. He carried no assistants. No expensive gifts. Only a simple wooden box. May recognized his footsteps immediately. "You're the gentleman who bought lilies." "I am." He placed the box gently on the counter. "May I sit?" "Of course." For several minutes, none of us spoke. Finally, the chairman opened the box. Inside rested a silver pocket watch. Its glass was cracked. "This belonged to my son." May touched it carefully. The moment her fingers traced the engraved initials, her breathing changed. She frowned. "I know this." She pressed both hands against her temples. Images flashed across her mind. A train station. A young man laughing. Rain. The scent of lilies. A promise whispered into the night. Then, pain. Sharp enough to steal her breath. I reached forward instinctively. "It's all right." Tears rolled silently down her cheeks. "I remember." She looked toward the chairman. His name was Jian. The old man's shoulders trembled. "He loved lilies because I did. He carried this watch every day," he said. Her voice broke. "He said he would come back before our baby was born." The chairman closed his eyes. For years he had searched for certainty. Now he finally had it. And it hurt. Several medical specialists later confirmed what they had only suspected. The trauma from the warehouse collapse had intensified memory loss caused by an earlier attack. Someone had tried to erase May from the story long before the building collapsed. She hadn't disappeared by choice. She had survived. Barely. Victor invited me to lunch one afternoon. Not at a luxury restaurant. At a small noodle shop near the river. "I thought you'd appreciate somewhere honest," he said. "I do." He stirred his teeth thoughtfully. "The board wants me to become acting chairman. You'll accept." I wasn't asking. He smiled. "I was wondering if that disappoints you." "Why would it? Most people who expose corruption expect influence. I already have work." He looked out the window. "I've spent decades surrounded by ambitious people. And you may be the first man I've met who doesn't want anything." I considered that for a moment. "I want enough." He nodded slowly. "Perhaps that's why people trust you." A week later, the taxi company called. This time the owner himself wanted to meet. "I owe you an apology." "You don't owe me one. I judged you by appearances. So did everyone else. I'd like to offer you a management position." I look around the office. The same cracked walls. The same faded schedules. Only the owner's attitude had changed. "I appreciate it. But I like driving." He blinked. "You'd rather stay behind the wheel?" "I meet people there. They remind me who I am." He extended his hand. "I won't try to convince you otherwise." For the first time since joining the company, we shook hands as equals. The flower stall eventually became too small. Not because anyone grew rich. Because too many people wanted to help. Students volunteered after classes. Retired gardeners donated plants. Local cafes bought weekly floral arrangements. Mr. Huang insisted the new shop include a bench outside, so lonely people have somewhere to sit. May laughed. "You're secretly sentimental." I deny everything. The grand opening wasn't grand at all. No celebrities. No television crews. Just neighbors. Children. Taxi drivers. Street cleaners. Nurses. Construction workers. People whose names rarely appeared in newspapers. Together they filled the little shop with conversation and warmth. As I watched them, I understood something that wealth alone could never purchase. Belonging. Near sunset, Chairman Shun quietly approached me. "The DNA results are complete." I looked toward him. They confirmed it. He nodded. "My missing son's child is alive." I felt my heartbeat quicken. "Where?" He smiled through tears. "Safe." He looked through the shop window toward May. She never knew. The child was taken immediately after birth. And now, we're searching. Not for an heir. Not for a fortune. For family. For a life stolen before it had the chance to begin. The search was only beginning. Yet something had already changed inside all of us. We no longer searched from desperation. We searched from hope. And hope, unlike fear, had a remarkable way of bringing people together. Peace begins when winning stops mattering. That evening, after closing the flower shop, May handed me a single white lily. For the taxi. So it smells nicer. She laughed. So, you remember there are beautiful places to return to. I placed the flower carefully on the dashboard. As the engine started, I realized I no longer drove through the city trying to escape my past. I drove toward tomorrow. And for the first time in many years, tomorrow didn't frighten me. Winter arrived quietly. The flower shop stood on the same corner beneath the old pedestrian bridge, but it no longer looked forgotten. Warm lights glowed through its windows each evening, and the scent of lilies drifted into the street where hurried commuters often slowed their pace without realizing why. My taxi still stopped there every morning, not because anyone asked me to, because it had become home. The search for Jian's child had spread far beyond the Shin family. Police reopened old missing person files. Hospitals compared decades-old birth records. Journalists uncovered adoption agencies that had operated in legal gray areas years earlier. The city followed every headline. But inside the flower shop, life remained surprisingly ordinary. May arranged bouquets. Mr. Huang argued with suppliers over flower prices. Children from a nearby school stopped in after class simply to water the plants. Hope had become routine, and that, I discovered, was one of life's greatest miracles. One rainy afternoon, Victor called. We found someone. My grip tightened around the steering wheel. Are you certain? We believe so. Where? A small coastal town. He hesitated. The adoption records were altered, but the DNA matches. For a long moment I couldn't speak. After years of lies, after corruption, fear, and silence, the search had finally reached its destination. Chairman Shin chose not to arrive with lawyers or bodyguards. Only Victor accompanied him. May insisted on coming despite her trembling hands. I've already lost enough years, she said quietly. I'm not losing another day. I drove all 3 of them. The journey lasted several hours. No one slept. No one talked very much. Some moments carried too much weight for conversation. The house stood beside the sea. Paint peeled from its wooden walls. Wind chimes swayed gently on the porch. An elderly couple opened the door. The woman immediately understood why we had come. Her eyes filled with tears. I always knew this day would arrive. She stepped aside. Inside, a young man in his early 20s looked up from repairing a fishing net. He frowned politely. Grandma. The room fell silent. He looked from Victor, to Chairman Shun, to May, and finally to me. I don't understand. Neither did any of us. Not yet. The elderly woman slowly explained everything. 22 years earlier, an injured infant had been left anonymously outside the local clinic. No name, no documents, only a small silver bracelet engraved with the character for hope. The authorities never located his parents. Unable to have children themselves, the elderly couple eventually adopted him. We promised we'd love him, the old man said. And we did. Chairman Shun bowed deeply. So did you. There was no anger, only gratitude, because they had given the boy something wealth never could. A childhood. DNA testing removed every remaining doubt. The young fisherman, Daniel, was Jian and May's son. The missing heir, the child everyone believed had vanished forever. Daniel sat quietly for several minutes after hearing the truth. Finally, he asked a question no one expected. Do I have to leave? Chairman Shun answered immediately. No. Daniel looked surprised. I've lived here my whole life. Then this is your home. The chairman smiled gently. I came to find my grandson, not to take someone else's son away. The elderly couple lowered their heads, overcome with emotion. No one had to lose family for another family to be found. Later that evening, Daniel and May walked alone along the shoreline. She couldn't see his face. He couldn't remember hers. Yet neither of them seemed uncomfortable. I don't know what mothers usually say, May admitted. Daniel laughed softly. I don't know what sons usually say either. Silence settled between them. Comfortable silence. The kind that asked for nothing. Finally, Daniel reached for her hand. You don't have to remember everything. She squeezed his fingers gently. Neither do you. The sea carried their words away, leaving only understanding behind. Months passed. Shin International underwent sweeping reforms under Victor and Chairman Shun. Victims of the warehouse collapse received long overdue compensation. Corrupt executives face trial. Adrian Shun was convicted on multiple charges after additional witnesses came forward. Ironically, very few people mentioned me during the court proceedings. At first, some reporters considered that strange. I didn't. The story had never belonged to me. It belonged to the people who finally received justice. That was enough. One spring morning, I parked outside the flower shop as usual. Except it wasn't only a flower shop anymore. A small sign hung beneath the original one. The Hope Garden, community flowers, and cafe. Inside, neighbors shared tea while children learned to arrange flowers for Mr. Huang. Retired veterans played chess by the window. College students studied in the afternoons. Lonely people found conversations waiting for them. It had become exactly what Mr. Huang imagined. A place where no one needed an excuse to belong. Victor approached me with 2 cups of coffee. You still drive? I do. You could retire comfortably if you accepted the chairman's offer. I know. So why don't you? I looked toward the street. Passengers waved for taxis. Life continued. Because every morning someone climbs into the back seat carrying a story. And I've learned never to underestimate where a simple ride can lead. Victor smiled. I suppose that's why Jian would have liked you. I never answered. Some compliments deserve silence. Near sunset, Chairman Shun stood beside the old bridge where everything had begun. I spent years searching in the wrong places, he said quietly. I searched with money. I searched with influence. I searched with power. He looked toward the flower shop. The answer was waiting beside ordinary people all along. I followed his gaze. May laughed as Daniel attempted to wrap flowers and failed spectacularly. Mr. Huang pretended to scold him. The customers applauded anyway. It wasn't perfection. It was family. As darkness settled over the city, I climbed back into my taxi. The white lily still rested on the dashboard. Fresh. May replaced it every week without telling me. I started the engine and merged into the evening traffic. At the next intersection, a young woman carrying a crying child raised her hand for a ride. I pulled over. She climbed in with an embarrassed smile. I'm sorry. It's been a difficult day. I nodded. We all have those. She looked at the flower on my dashboard. Someone must care about you. I glanced at the lily before returning my eyes to the road. They do. For years I believed dignity came from being seen by the world. I was wrong. Dignity came from choosing kindness, even when no one was watching. From refusing to let bitterness decide who I became. From understanding that silence was not weakness when it protected peace. The city outside my windshield was still loud, still impatient, still quick to judge, but it no longer decided my worth. The meter began counting. The traffic light turned green, and the road stretched endlessly ahead. This time, I wasn't driving toward recognition. I was simply driving forward. The people who walk beside you in your darkest hours become the true measure of a life well lived.